online, thanks so much for joining us at Vintage Grace through YouTube or Facebook, however you're watching. We're happy to have you here. I want to invite you to look to the sun this morning and join us in worship as we praise our King together. Oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on our Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun. Oh, we look to the sun. Salvation tearing through the dead of night. See the kingdom burst into color at the speed of light. Freedom shaking up the atmosphere as the shadows fade into nothing as the day appears. Beyond the skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. Oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on our Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun. Creation, waking up to kingdom come. See the hope of heaven shining like the rising sun. Now forever lifted up from death to life. There's no fear in love and no darkness in His endless light. Beyond the skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. Oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on our Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun. Oh, we look to the sun. Beyond the skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. Beyond the skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. Oh, we look to the sun. Oh, we look to the sun. Oh, we look to
Good morning, VG family. We hope you had an awesome Thanksgiving weekend, and thanks for joining us online. This was definitely not our plan, but God has invited us into this as well, and so here we are. So with the rising cases in our community, we're taking the necessary precautions and trying to act swiftly. So the office has actually been closed since Wednesday afternoon and will remain closed for the remainder of next week. But we're all fully available as staff and leaders via email and phone calls during this strange season.
Church, we are praying for all of you and for those who are affected by COVID specifically, that you heal quickly and that we can all get back to in-person services for this Christmas season. So we invite you to communicate openly with us if you've been exposed or anything, as we will add you to our prayer list and activate our care team.
Yeah, so regardless of any of our circumstances, our joy is in Jesus. Our confidence is in Him and that He will ultimately win, and that remains true and catapults us forward in every season. So as we enter this Christmas season, may you be reminded that we have our confidence in a God that is working and moving even when it seems like He isn't.
I would like to thank you again for deciding to join us online. When you could have opted out completely, you chose to offer God your time. Here are a few things that we want you to know as we get started. If you're new here with us, we actually want to get to know you. You can text the words VG Connect to 474747 and we will contact you. We know that this discipleship journey can start online, but it can't stay online. So we would encourage you to get into community by joining a life group. You can join a life group by emailing our friend David at davidk@vintagegrace.org.
Now, could you imagine if your kids didn't have access to a computer, let alone Wi-Fi, but still had to participate in remote learning? There are some kids in South Sac who are living that reality. And so we've been partnering with Matt Moore, our church planner down in Oak Park, through a ministry called The Learning Lab to help meet the needs of these students, not only survive this educational season, but continue to thrive. And here's what you can do to help, what we're doing as a church family to make a difference. We want to invite you to put together boxes with us for these kids for the Learning Lab. We want to love them well this Christmas so they know that they're seen and known by God through you, that this good work would lead to goodwill and good news. So we have boxes and packing lists available for you to pick up. You can actually pick up your box starting today between 9 and 12 p.m. in our drive-through line over at Vintage Grace. They're due back to us by December 20th, just in time for Christmas.
Please know, we are so with you. We are for you. And we hope that you continue to discover that there's more joy in Jesus than anyone or anything else. And regardless of the obstacles that this world seems to keep throwing at us, God is still on the move. There's a huge list in our year-end giving letter that displays all of God's movement. And even this, check out an interview from our very newest elder candidate, Lee Stacy.
Hey, Vintage family, I am super excited to be with you today and really celebrating what God's doing, not just to us as a church, but through us. And so today I want to introduce you to our elder candidate for 2021. Elders are a huge part of who we are as a church. We believe that God has set up and structured the church to be led by plurality, and our elders are the ones that are guarding the vision. We often use a ship metaphor at Vintage Grace, where we as His saints are hoisting the sails on a ship, and we're asking the Spirit of God to blow where He wants to lead us and move us forward. And the elders are the ones that are really holding the rudder. They're holding the course steady on building joy-filled communities of faith, on being a disciple-making church and sending everyday missionaries. And so I have a great privilege of currently serving as a part of the elder board. And we as a board are really excited to introduce you to our elder candidate for 2021, which is Lee Stacy. This has been really about a year-long process that we've been praying as elders. Every year we go into it. Our elders serve in 3 2-year renewable terms. And so really every 6 years we've got a board of currently 6 and hopefully going to be adding Lee in 21. And we want to introduce him to you as a church family, as a church congregation, so you can get to know him and then and really be praying for him and for our church leadership. So Lee, give us a context of really kind of who you are in your journey of trusting and treasuring Christ. What brought you to faith and where did that journey begin? And so, yeah, share just a piece of your testimony with us as a church today.
Well, hello, Vintage Grace family. Lee Stacy here. Been attending Vintage Grace for about 4 years, and just super humbled and excited for the opportunity to look at the possibility of being an elder for Vintage Grace. I'm a father of 5, married to Jen, who is a part of my testimony, which I'll get to in a second here. And I have 5 daughters. One who's currently serving over with YWAM in Hawaii. She's 20, Sienna, and she interned at Vintage Grace, I think, last summer.
Yep.
And then Michaela is a Cal Poly student. That's the one I went and picked up, 18 years old. And then triplets that are 16 and currently involved with the Vintage Grace youth group. Before I married Jen, we were dating for 4 years, and I thought I had asked all the right questions leading up to the event of asking her to marry me. And I obviously didn't, because when I asked her, she said no. And what she said no to me was not that she didn't love me, not that she didn't want to marry me, but no, she didn't want to marry somebody who didn't believe in Jesus. And there was a lot of tears and a lot of talking that went along with that. But I made the commitment to find out who Jesus was. So for the next year, I started attending churches and trying to figure out what it meant to follow Jesus. And what I did find out is it's not going to church. It's not a Sunday service. And that's not where I found Jesus. I found Sunday services to be an event, where you got inspired, had some donuts, met some nice people, but it isn't where I met Jesus. Where I met Jesus was by people pouring into my life and discipling to me and finding out that Jesus is every single day, every minute of my life, and it's my dedication to following him. And that's when I accepted Jesus, and Jen and I got married and had 5 kids. So
Awesome.
folks spent a lot of time with me, discipling to me, and it was extremely important in my walk. Some of the folks are still involved in my life today. The Rettingers who attend Vintage Grace were one of the key people to do that. And life groups. So that brings me to really one of the things that attract me to Vintage Grace is small groups of people discipling to each other and following Jesus is so important. And with Vintage Grace's and Drew's passion for life groups being the primary way to disciple is key. And so I've been involved in the adults ministry team to trying to defend that vision and keep that vision moving forward for Vintage Grace.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And so I've been able to serve with Lee. He's been a life group leader for the last few years. Last year serving on our adult ministries team, as he said, that helps us oversee our life group teams, because those are our house churches. And then we gather on that Sunday gathering to have all those groups come together to celebrate and to enjoy God. And so, Lee, when we first came to you as an elder board, again, we had already been praying for you and over this next step for us as a church, because it's a big deal to guard the vision, to protect the vision, to help us lead forward as a church. Now, I joke with elder candidates, because whenever I have the first conversation, or Jeremy's, our elder chair, has the first conversation, most elders candidates are like, wait, I wasn't looking to be an elder. And that's almost like a pre-qualification. No one wakes up one morning and says, I want to be an elder. In fact, that might be a disqualification, because there's a weight and a spiritual reality to that. But now that you've gone through the process with these last 6 months or so, what is it that you're looking forward to about being an elder at Vintage Grace?
There's a couple things. First of all, part of going through the elder process is you get a chance to spend a significant amount of time with each of the elders. And one thing is I've been super impressed with our elder board. They each one of them has inspired me to be just a stronger follower of Christ, and they just really are rock solid individuals and are defending the vision for Vintage Grace. So that is what really impressed me in the process. But I see Vintage Grace and where we're going as a church in the R1, R2, R3, and fighting for our joy of Jesus. I mean, this is a place where I'm raising my family. I plan on being for a long time, and the vision is focused on making disciples and followers of Jesus. So that excites me, and excites me to be on this battleship, not just with the elders and you, Drew, but with everybody in our church, because the future is really bright, and I'm super excited.
Yeah. And I'm fired up again to invite Lee into this process, to get to know him even more in this process. One of the most humbling parts about inviting Lee onto the elder board from us as an elder's perspective is that Lee lives out our vision. I love our vision. I got to help write our vision, but vision's cheap unless it's actually lived out. And so Lee's been living our vision. And so it's such a gift to get to partner with you, Lee. To you, Vintage family, if you have any questions about Lee as an elder candidate, we'll be voting to affirm him to our new elder board for 21 at our annual meeting, which is the fourth Sunday in January. So it's about 2 months away. So if you have any questions about his character, his love of Jesus, his passion for our vision and what God's entrusted us with as an elder board, as church family, you can go to Lee directly. You can go to me or anyone on the elder board and express any questions or concerns, or even just attaboys and air high fives. We'll take those as well. But we're just grateful as the lead pastor to get to serve with such an incredible elder board that loves the Lord, that is committed to making disciples and living as missionaries. Church, I just don't know if you recognize how unique and special that is. I do as a senior pastor, as an elder myself. And so, Lee, it's just a gift to have you play this role. We're so excited for 2021 and for what God's doing, not just to us, but like we say, through us as a church. And so, church, we love you right now. We're going to get ready to dive into the Gospel of John. So if you have your Bibles, pull them out. I can't wait. Let's dive into the text together for God's glory, like last week, and ultimately for our good. We love you guys. Thank you, Lee.
What's up, church? Thank you so much for joining us for Church Online. My name is Michael. I'm the youth pastor here, and I have the privilege of walking through God's Word with us this morning. You guys, what God has for us, I'm so excited to get into, because I believe that God selected this text for us. I believe that God wanted us to go through this text today, and so I hope that wherever you are, whatever you're going through, whatever your Sunday or Monday through Friday looked like this past week, whatever your Sunday looks like today, I hope that today you'll lean in and you'll ask God, what is it that you have for me today in your word? You guys, as we get into this text, there's really this big issue that's going to rise up for us as we go through it. And it's the issue of something called judgment, right? Being judgmental, judging people. Now, I don't know about you, but I really don't like judgmental people. Do you guys agree? Don't you wish you could just talk to them? Yeah, judgmental people can be kind of annoying. I know I get frustrated with them. You know, the last thing we want to do is be around judgmental people, because we feel like we're being scrutinized. We feel like everything we do is underneath a microscope. We feel like we can't win sometimes, like they don't have our back. Being around judgmental people is taxing. It's draining. Hopefully you guys don't have too many judgmental people in your life, because, man, let me tell you, it can get really obnoxious. Maybe it's like religious people you've encountered where they've been really judgmental about different aspects about lifestyle, or different aspects about how you raise your kids, how you educate your kids. Maybe it's people in the world who are judgmental of you because you follow Jesus, or because you're exploring these ideas of Christianity. Maybe you've been encountering people like that, or maybe you're just sick and tired of all the judgmental people you seem to see on social media. I heard one social commentator put it this way, that it feels like the landscape of social media has become littered with all of these little thrones, with people sitting on them like tyrants, pronouncing their judgments upon every person and everything that they will. It feels like judgment is inescapable. It feels like judgmental people are inescapable. But let's flip the script for a second. How often are we judgmental? How often are we guilty of judging other people unfairly? I asked that question because when I was thinking about this concept that is going to come right out of the text today, is I realized that I can be judgmental too. My wife and I were getting ready to have our first kid. We are very excited for that. And what we're becoming keenly aware of are the parenting styles and tactics of those around us. Now, I know some of you just got a little nervous, thinking, oh my gosh, Daisie's going to be a parent. Or number two, oh my gosh, he's watching me be a parent. Yeah, the fact of the matter is, we're just watching. We're learning, we're taking notes, and we're trying to figure out how to become great parents one day that'll raise our kid to love Jesus. Now, as we kind of barrel toward that, we're also seeking wisdom, right? So we're talking to different people, asking their opinions, how they do, what they do. And there was one family in particular where we were having dinner at their house, and we were talking about like, hey, how do you do like digital and devices with your kids? How do you make that work? We're trying to think through what that's going to mean for our kid one day. And while we were talking to them, they said something that was really insightful, that's really helped me change my perspective. They said, you know how when you're out at a restaurant and you see that kid at the table and the parents just want them to stop screaming? They hand them the iPad and then whoop, they're in it, they're focused, they're no longer screaming. The parents can enjoy a quiet meal. Do you ever judge them when that happens? I kind of, sat there a little uncomfortably and thought to myself, yeah, I do. Sometimes I do. I'm like, oh, wow, what, they just have to have their kid focused on a device? Now, some of you right now are those kinds of people, and that's okay, because what I learned is I'm probably going to be that kind of person too. Here's why. They said, think about it this way. They just spent the whole day with this kid trying to keep him focused or entertained or working or growing or whatever it is. And for this brief 45-minute window, while they're out at BJ's or Lazy Dog or whatever, they have the kid quiet. It's worth it. I never thought of it from that perspective. The thing with judgment and making judgment, being judgmental, is oftentimes we don't take into account others' perspectives, and we make pronouncements or declarations about what is good or what is right or what is wrong without understanding where the other person's coming from. I was super thankful for them and what they shared with me. And the more I was thinking about it, the more I realized that I think we do this with all kinds of categories. Sure, there's parenting, but there's also politics. Maybe you encountered a little bit of that at your Thanksgiving dinner this past week, of people lamenting or rejoicing whatever outcome they wanted or didn't want to have happen. Maybe you judge other people's marriages. You think, man, they sure can't seem to figure this thing out. Or maybe we judge the way that other people spend their money. We look at the car that they drive, or the schools they have their kids in, or we look at the ways that they purchase things from certain grocery stores or whatever, and we look and we make judgments about who they are, what they're like. Maybe we make judgments about masks, about who wears the masks, who doesn't, who does, when they do it, when they choose not to. There are so many things that we tend to make judgments about as people. And it's not just things that other people do. It's not just things that we encounter in life. In fact, we make judgments about God himself. Think about it. I know, at least for me, in the past few months, at least since March, there have been plenty of times where I've sat back and wondered, God, what are you doing? What's going on? Why is the world the way it is? Or why are we encountering what we're encountering? Or why are we facing this challenge that we're facing? And there have been many times over the last few months where I've found myself judging God, saying, God, are you sure this is a great idea, in my heart of hearts? And even sometimes with other people. Maybe it's ironically mocking, like, oh, okay, well, God surely has a plan. But here's the problem, is that we find ourselves oftentimes being judgmental and not even necessarily realizing that's what we're doing. It's a real challenge that I think that we face as people. It's a challenge that we face as believers in Jesus. It's a challenge we face as parents, through our marriage, through the way we use our finances. It's all over. So what do we do with judgment, being judgmental, making judgmental decisions? Because surely it can't be all wrong to make a judgment, right? We have to decide whether or not we're going to eat the other turkey leg when our family member wants that one. Or we have to decide how we're going to spend our money. We have to decide how we're going to decide where we go, right? We have to decide on deciding sometimes. And all of that connotates the notion of judgment, right? Deciding between one thing or another, determining right, determining wrong. There's also the whole idea of, if we didn't make judgment or pass judgment, we'd be in some lawless society, right? Like, somebody has to have the final say if that was good or if that was evil, and there has to be some sort of recompense for whatever action that is. So we find ourselves almost at an impasse, because judging is necessary. The judicial sentiment in your own heart is one of the evidences that God is exactly who he says he is. The fact that you would say something is morally good or morally bad is evidence that there is a moral good and a moral bad on an ontological level. So that's a good thing. But we can sometimes find ourselves in trouble when it comes to this. I've been working on this kind of graph here for you guys. I'm going to nerd out and show it to you, because we have to answer this question of, what do we do with judgment? How do we deal with it? And so I've got this little judgment matrix I've been working on. It's very much in development, so I appreciate any and all critique. Just send it my way, because I'd love to make this better. Anyway, I want to share it with you because it's been helping me think about judgment and helping me place myself as I assess where I'm at with my relationship with the way that I judge things or other people. So check this out. We've got this matrix here where you have an action that somebody does. Somebody, they run over a baby bird. Okay, sorry, that was probably too far. Or maybe somebody curses somebody out, or somebody steals from another individual. Somebody says something or makes a big decision about their life and who they choose to be with in a relationship, okay? All kinds of different actions. They can fall into this matrix here. We look at an action and we either look at it and say, you know what? I'm going to accept it. I receive it. Like, that's okay. I'm going to embrace what you just did. Or we reject the action. We say, no, that's not right. We need to deal with that. So we accept it or we reject it. And then on the other hand, there's another thing that we do with someone's action. So this is for us personally. Do we accept or reject what the person or individual did? And then the embrace and enforce is when it comes to how we treat the individual that does the action. You follow? So somebody, again, sorry, baby bird lovers, but somebody runs over a baby bird. We decide whether or not we're okay with that or not. We accept it or we reject it. And then we determine whether or not we're going to embrace our, whoever this is that did this, or we're going to enforce whoever it is that did this. And so based upon how you would react to different situations, you could find yourselves in different quadrants of this matrix. Check it out. We got Team Tolerate. Anybody out there on Team Tolerate? I actually find myself here quite often. I see somebody do something that maybe I disagree with, or I know it's not God's best for them, or I do something that I know is wrong. Oftentimes, I will just accept it and then embrace it. I don't enforce it. I don't try to fix it. Don't try to make it better. I'm just like, no, it's okay. We're on Team Tolerate. It's going to be just fine. There's some obvious problems with that, but we'll get there in a second. There's Team Tolerate. Then there's another group of people who you might be familiar with, you might be a part of, you may have heard of. I like to call them the moral militia. Okay, the moral militia. They're the ones who say, hey, you did something wrong and you need to pay for it, and I'm going to help you pay for it. Like, they see something and they want to deal with it right away, and they want to enact justice themselves. This is the moral militia. They reject the action and they enforce the correct action on the individual that does it. The next group of people we have are the moral monks. I chose monks not to pick on the monastic movement, but because alliteration, people. Come on, that's why I'm here, okay? The moral monks, the ones who see something and they identify it as being wrong, but they choose not to do anything about it. They choose to just embrace the thing that happened that is wrong. They hide away. They just isolate with other people that think something is wrong as well, or think something is right as well, and they become the kind of moral monks. The final quadrant down here, those who would accept something but then enforce something, they're what I like to call the Tolerance Task Force, okay? Maybe you've seen them on social media. Maybe you're a member of the Tolerance Task Force that is going around saying, hey, we need to accept people for whatever moral decision they make. We need to embrace people, and if you don't do it, I'm going to choke you. Okay, maybe that's a little strong, but if you look at all the outrage on social media, it feels like there's this militia and there's these enforcers, and they're both running two different trains down different tracks, but trying to accomplish the same thing. And that's enforcing what they believe to either be a rejection of an action or acceptance of an action. And so as you've been listening to this, you might be like, Michael, what's with all the alliteration? It's for memorability, okay? But the second thing you might be wondering is, where do I place myself on this graph? If we're just really honest with where we are and how we deal with other people that we might disagree with, or we might have beef with, we might think is doing something wrong, or even the way we treat people we think are right, where do we tend to find ourselves on this quadrant? Do you find yourself as somebody who's on Team Tolerate, like, hey, it's all good. Let's just love each other. It's going to be okay. Do you find yourself as one of the moral monks? You're like, they're all wrong and forget them all. I'm moving to another state. Sorry, if you're moving to Idaho. I'm not calling you this, okay? If you look at others and say, I'm going to remove myself from them, you might be in the moral monk category. Maybe you're on tolerance task force. You're going around enforcing people to accept every single thing somebody does. Maybe that's where you lie, or maybe, just maybe, you're part of that moral militia who has to be right and has to make it right. Now, I'm not making any sort of qualitative statement about any of these four quadrants beyond the fact that any extreme in these zones is likely unhealthy. If you find yourself way up here, it's likely unhealthy. If you find yourself way up here rejecting all other people and just hiding away and embracing it, it's probably unhealthy. I think that there might be some type of fifth option, some type of fifth way that what we're going to see in the text today invites us to adopt, because it might be a better way of dealing with judgment, with other people, with our own issues of judgment ourselves, and it might just be the Jesus way. And so that's what I want you guys to see as we go through this text today. We're going to be in John chapter 5, verse 16 is where we're starting. And where we're picking up is there's this man who was healed. His name, we don't know, but what we do know is that he was paralyzed for 38 years. Can you even imagine that, being paralyzed for 38 years? I haven't even been alive for 38 years. This man was paralyzed for 38 years. Like Drew said last weekend, he would sit at this pool just waiting for people to throw him in because of this urban legend that an angel would come by, stir the waters, and if you got in there, you could get healed. He had been doing this for years, having people bring him out to this pool. And finally, Jesus walks by one day and heals him. He heals him and he sends him on his way. But as he sent him on his way, the guy narcs on Jesus. He tells the religious leaders of the day exactly who it is who told him to pick up his mat and walk. Now, you might be sitting there saying, okay, well, what's the problem with that? What would be the problem with saying to this person, hey, pick up your mat and walk? It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Well, the problem is that it's on the Sabbath. And so this question of what is the other option, what is the other way, it's exactly what we're going to see Jesus do as he responds to these religious people that were angry at him and that were mad at him. We're picking up in John chapter 5, verse 16. Check it out. It says, and this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus. Get this. He healed somebody. He healed somebody, and the religious leaders of the day didn't have a category for it. They didn't have a way of interpreting it. They said, whoa, you healed somebody on the Sabbath. That's wrong. How backwards do you have to get to where you have to think that healing somebody would be wrong? Well, what happened was the guy picked up his mat. You weren't supposed to do that. You weren't supposed to carry things on the Sabbath. You were supposed to stay down. And so they start to persecute Jesus. It says that it was because he did it on the Sabbath. And then Jesus answers him. Now, there's not a whole lot of tone indicators, like there's no emojis in the Bible. You don't roll through and you see angry face, angry face, angry face, the one with the black line and all the squiggles, okay? You don't see that in the Bible. But I would guess by looking at this and the response Jesus has, he's not happy with the way the religious leaders are responding to him. It seems like he's pretty infuriated, if you will. Here's what he fires back with. He says, my Father is working until now, and I am working. This is why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him. Now, at first glance, for us to see him say, hey, my Father's working, so I'm working, it doesn't really trigger us in the same way that it triggered his original audience. His original audience heard, my Father's working, so I'm working, and they started to draw the dots together. They started to connect them together. The religious leaders knew that there was one being in all of the universe that was permitted to move about during the Sabbath. That was God the Father. God the Father was permitted to work during the Sabbath. He could. He didn't have to. He chose to rest on the seventh day. The rabbis knew this. They knew that there was only one individual. Now, Jesus says, my Father's working. There's only one Jewish dad. And if he's in the temple hanging out with these Jewish people, he's going to be most likely Jewish. There's only one Jewish dad out there who is working today. And we all know who that is. It's God the Father. And so if God the Father is working, Jesus says, hey, I'm him. I can work. What he's doing is he's making himself equal with God. He's saying, I'm on the same level. And this right here, people, this right here, this seals Jesus' fate in many ways. I mean, Jesus knew from the get-go that he was here to die on the cross for our sins. But it's this moment right here where the temperature knob gets turned all the way up and they say, we need to kill him. It's time. Let's kill him because of blasphemy. He's literally claiming to be equal with God. If you read, it says, but he was even calling God his own father, making himself equal with God. Now here's what kills me. There are a whole lot of world religions out there, a whole lot of different perspectives that are out there that would beg to differ with this statement right here. They'd say, you know what? Jesus was a great moral teacher, but he was never God. He never even claimed to be God. There was never one instance in the entire New Testament where he claimed to be God. That's what they'll say. If you look at the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witness, they're sitting there saying, you know what? No, Jesus is not part of the Trinity. He's not one with the Father. He's another individual. That's what Jehovah's Witness would say. The Mormons would say, no, Jesus was just a really good spiritual being. He's not actually God himself. The same is true about the Muslims. The Muslims would say, no, Jesus is not God. Secular humanists would look at it and say, you know what? He was a good moral teacher, but he definitely wasn't God. The agnostic would sit there and say, I'm not sure what I think, right? The atheist would sit there and say, no, there's no way this is even true. And we have to look at a text like this and throw all of our intellect at it, all of our emotion at it, all of our capacity at this text to weigh the question of, is this really what's happened? Did Jesus really say this? And if he did, what's the implication? Because there's not a whole lot we can do with a statement like this where he says, I am equal to God. You got a few choices here. He's either full-blown lying, he's full-on crazy, or this is just some legend that somebody made up at some point about some religious leader that claimed to be God, which, by the way, there's no other religion in the world where the person claimed to be God and then resurrected and said, hey, yeah, I am God. Like that, they don't do that. They talk about another being. But this one, Christianity that we believe, is saying, no, Jesus is God. He claims to be God, and then he proves to be God. And so we're left with the question of, okay, well, is he Lord? This is the question everybody's so mad about who's listening. And they don't believe it. They don't buy it. Like, what are you talking about, equal with God? No one's equal with God. And so Jesus continues going on saying, hey, here's how this works. I can see how upset you are. I can see how much you want to kill me. Because remember, end of John chapter 3, Jesus says that he knows what's in the heart of man. He knows exactly what's going on in them. And he says this, truly, truly, I say to you. You ever see that in Scripture? Get ready, all right? Buckle up. He's about to drop a truth bomb on you. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, that the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing. And greater works than these will he show him, so that you may marvel. Jesus is bold-faced claiming to be God. There's no way around it. He's saying, I am God. I am his Son. And beyond that, I have this unique relationship with God. Now, this right here should give you a little bit of a headache. It gives me a headache, at least every time I think about it. It's what theologians would call the Trinity, right? It's one of the distinctives of what it means to be a Christian, is that we believe in God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, three in one. One being that is also three beings, that expresses himself differently, but is also different, but is also one, okay? It sounds paradoxical because on many levels, it kind of is. He's the only being in the universe that exists in this state. And here's one of the beautiful things we see is that the Son does nothing on his own accord. There's not a single thing that Jesus did that was not what God wanted him to do. So on many levels, we see that Jesus is the example of what it means to live a holy life. But not just that, he is God himself. And so every action that he takes, he doesn't move without consulting God his Father first. So we can infer that everything that he does is what God would do. You see, one theologian put it this way. He said that Jesus exegetes the Father to us. He narrates the story. He draws out the meaning from who the Father is to us. That's what Jesus does. He shows us everything the Father would will in every action that he took. And it says in here that the Father loves the Son. One of my favorite examples and words that are used to describe the Trinity is this word called the perichoresis. Okay, this is your 10-cent word for today, people. Okay, I know we're going a little bit of Greek here, but I love it. It's going to be worth it. Check this out. Okay, the perichoresis. It basically means the dance. And there's an early theologian that said that the way the Trinity works is a lot more like a dance. The Father loves the Son and moves with the Son, and the Spirit moves with the three of them, and the Father sends the Son, and the Son sends the Spirit, and there's this interplay that happens where the Son submits everything that he does to the Father. Not a single thing is done apart from what the Father would want. And yet what we see the Father do in this next text is it says that the Father gives things to the Son. He gives him authority. He gives him honor. He lays down stuff for him. And the Spirit is what is existing between them and is its own individual person that is present with us, that comes alongside of us. And it exists in a dance. My wife is a dancer. She did, ballet for years, contemporary, all that stuff. And what is so incredible is watching them do what they do, man. They have to work together. They have to read each other. They have to know the dance. They have to know the choreography. But when it all works together, it's beautiful. It's inspiring. It communicates a story. That's exactly what God does. God himself, the love, the dance between the Father, the Son, the Spirit, that dance communicates a story on a level that is penetrating all of creation, saying that there is love, perfect love in there. It says that the Father loves the Son. He loves the Son. And it's that love that we've had the opportunity to get a little bit of a glimpse into. This beautiful love that he's put on display for you and for me, that we might receive it. And so because of that, Jesus said that we would marvel at the greater things he would do. And moving forward, this is what it says, that the Father raises the dead and gives them life. So God the Father has this power that he can do. He can raise the dead. There's certain things that are reserved for God the Father to do. And yet, here's what happens. It says, so also the Son gives life to whom he will. The people listening would have known that only God can resurrect people. Like, that's a pretty big miracle. But you're telling me the Son can do that too? John is foreshadowing something very important here. Jesus' final miracle will be raising a man named Lazarus from the dead. And that will be the moments before he would enter into Jerusalem to be crucified. His final miracle from there is then resurrecting himself. This is a power given to him by God because he is God. You guys following the headache here? Okay, he gives it to him. He submits to him. They submit to each other, but they don't have to. They choose to. It's amazing. It's amazing. It says that the Son gives life to whom he will. For the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son. That's where judgment is coming into play. The Son has been given the right and the ability to judge on every level, to judge in every situation. He has the final say. It says he's given him the ability to judge. Why? So that all might honor the Son. Now, the notion of judgment that we talked about earlier was very much in the category of how we treat one another, how we think about God, how we judge people and judge one another. And the idea of judgment is pretty big, right? It encompasses a lot of things, especially God's judgment. Now, this is a topic that's uncomfortable for most. It's uncomfortable for me. It's probably uncomfortable for you. It's a topic that is probably not everyone's favorite to think about or to encounter. And in fact, when we talk about God being a judging being, a lot of people turn off. Like, whoa. I like the love part. I like the whole, nice God and buddy Jesus that wants to be my homeboy. But like the whole judging thing, the judgment against the earth, I'm not a fan. I don't want it. I don't like it. Don't like what it looks like. Don't like how it feels. Sure as heck don't want it to happen to me. I can't buy into a God like that. So we have a problem. What do we do with God's judgment? How does it work? Well, here's a couple things that we can think about. Is that there's a big difference between our judgment and God's judgment. Okay, there's a big difference between the two, a giant gap. And so we have to ask the question, okay, what are these problems with God's judgment? What's the big deal? Why do people have an issue with this? Why do you have an issue with it? Because I'm sure if you're sitting at home, there's probably plenty of things you could think about that are challenging when it comes to the notion of God's judgment. Check this out. We don't like it because it makes us uncomfortable. The idea of this all powerful being that can exact judgment upon whom he wills based upon what he decides is kind of intimidating. It's kind of terrifying. It's uncomfortable. It's unsettling. One of the other problems we have with it is we're not sure what role we play in it. Okay, wait, do we exact God's judgment? Are we a part of that? Are we not a part of that? Do we help? Do we not? We ask the question of, do we receive God's judgment or do we not receive God's judgment? This question of what role we play in it sometimes gets misapplied and misinterpreted as I need to be the person that tells you about God's judgment coming. Or we think, actually, I am a part of God's judgment against an individual. Like there's a lot of problems that can come from that mentality. But also from the mentality of wondering, do we even receive God's judgment? One of the things that we see in Romans 8 is that there's therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. There's none. We have full forgiveness, full acceptance into his family. And because of that, the word that's used for judgment in Revelation, the judgment that believers receive upon their resurrection, it comes from this idea of the Bema seat. It was like this thing that the people at the Olympic Games would hand out awards from. If you made it to the Olympics, like you were pumped, you were stoked. And so the connotation for the judgment of the believers isn't the same as what it is for those who did not decide to find and follow God with their life, for those who decided that they wanted to be their own God. And so there's this question of, do we receive it or do we not receive it? There's another question. We don't really like his decisions sometimes. Sure, God might be, exacting his judgment against something or some country or some whatever, but we don't really like what he does. And sometimes we think we could do it better. We say, God, why are you doing what you're doing? I don't understand. I don't get it. Sometimes we don't like what it looks like or what it feels like on an experiential level. The notion of God's judgment, maybe what he did in Genesis with the flood. We don't like what it looks like, that all these people had died. Some of us are on the other end of that spectrum, and we like it too much. We get too excited when we talk about judgment. Like, oh, God's judgment, let's go. Like, we get ready. I think that all of these have issues. These are all issues we encounter with God's judgment. These are some problems that we have to deal with. Beyond that, we also have the issue of our judgment. What's the problem with us? We have a really big problem. It's really easy to understand. You ready for this? It's this. Boom. Sin. That's it. The biggest problem with us, with our judgment, our propensity to judge others, the way that we judge ourselves, the way that we receive judgment from other people, the biggest problem with it is our sin. And it has some implications. Sin is, simply put, it's rebellion against a holy God. It's an offense against a holy God. We're broken, we mess up, but we also rebel. We also do things against him. And so because of that, we're fallible. Our judgments, our pronouncements against people of saying whether they're right or wrong, it's limited because we are fallible as people, as human beings. Not only that, but we have conflicting desires. We want things that maybe God doesn't want for us. We want God to do things that maybe God doesn't have planned or God doesn't want to do. We have conflicting desires where we end up settling for way lesser joys. We use terrible judgment at the Thanksgiving party, or we use terrible judgment at Black Friday sales. We miss the mark, and because of that, our judgment is fallible. Our judgment is limited. Not only is it limited based upon how much we can do, but it's limited by time. We only know what we know right here and right now. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. We can't control the future, but we know what God is going to do and who God is. And so what happens sometimes is we are limited by what we understand of the future, and we make poor judgment. So there's a real problem with our judgment. But what is so great about God and his judgment, and what is so helpful about the fact that he does judge? Because what I want to suggest to you today is that God's judgment is actually a way more comforting concept than you might have thought before this morning. It's a little bit more comforting than you might think, and here's why, okay? There's a lot of underlying foundations to God's judgment and how we get there. Number one, God's holy. God's holy, and he must pursue his own glory. If God was about anything else besides himself, he would be guilty of idolatry. Think about that. If God somehow elevated somebody else over himself. Like, let's say he cared a whole lot more about me and my boots today, like, than about other people. Like, that would be considered idolatry, because he would be putting someone else's glory above his own. And so in order to maintain the nature of being God, the highest being of which there is no other, he must pursue his own glory. He's bound to do that. He has to. Number two, God can't violate his own character. He can't. You see, the things that God has set up, the way that the world works, the way that he works, the love that he has, his faithfulness, he couldn't choose to not be faithful, because if he did, he would violate his character. And the exact things that he set up that are the definition of what it means to be holy would be broken. He can't do that. He can't violate his own character. And so there's a limitation there. The other one, God is both transcendent and immanent. This is a real challenge, because due to this aspect of God's nature, that he's transcendent, meaning he's beyond time. He's beyond what we're experiencing. He exists outside of it, can see into it, can enter in and act however he wills within it to drive it all toward his ultimate goal. He's transcendent. But he's also immanent, meaning he's right there along with us in our pain. He's right there along with us in our suffering. He's right there along with us in our questioning and in our doubt, in our hurt. God is present. And so he sees the world through this wide lens and through this narrow lens. And he interacts with us through a wide lens and a narrow lens. God knows exactly what the best thing for you is in your life. He also knows exactly what you're going to ultimately do. And so he's balancing these things as he judges and as he wills and as he does what it is that God has to do. And so God's justice, his judgment against evil, against moral infraction, against rebellion, against brokenness, his action toward justice for those things is complete in a transcendent sense. It's already done. He's already done it. He's already perfectly dealt with all evil by the end of time. He's already done it. And so as he looks in his transcendent lens, he's unshakably happy. And yet, God's justice is experienced in an immanent sense, meaning the perfect judgment that he has against all of humanity, all of creation, everything he's barreling toward his end, his perfect everything that comes into that is experienced in an immanent sense, meaning we experience it day by day. We don't get to know what tomorrow holds. We don't get to know what next weekend holds or what next year holds, but we do know who holds those things. We know it's God who holds next weekend. We know it's God who holds next year. We know it's God who holds our lives. And so knowing what we know about his character, knowing what we know about his faithfulness, that he can't violate, that there are promises he has made that he will hold to because he is a pure and a holy and a glorious God, then we can be confident in light of questions like, how do we deal with God's judgment? Finally, God's judgment has been poured out against sin. So the judgment and the condemnation and the pronouncement that you and I deserve as rebellious beings who have turned our back on a holy God, it's been paid for by what he does with his son Jesus on the cross. It's been completely paid for, every ounce of it. There's nothing more we have to do to make it up. This is the gospel. But yes, there's some bad news. There's some really bad news that we have messed it up, that we have royally offended a holy God. And the only way to pay for it is with blood. It's with our own lives. And yet what God did in his infinite love and the dance of the Trinity, this perichoresis, what he did for us is he took that judgment upon himself. He became the man of sorrows and experienced the condemnation that you and I deserved. And so because of that, we can have a relationship with him. We don't have to experience the judgment that's coming against all evil that exists. There's another thought, that God's judgment is still coming upon all of creation to make right what's wrong. Ideally, this is comforting. This is a comforting notion because this is the answer to every child that dies in an act of war underneath some rubble. It's the answer to what happens to every person who's violated on a walk home in the park. It's the answer to all of life's hardest questions, is this, that God will ultimately deal with it. He will ultimately judge, and he will have the final word. And God's judgment will be final. And so we can be comforted in the midst of things that we don't have answers for. because we know that God's word is final and that God will have the last say, and that whatever judgment he lets out, we can trust it. We can trust his judgment because he already knows the end of the story. He's got that wide lens and the narrow lens at the same time. And so what we do as his people is we submit our judgments against him, our judgments against others, our judgments against Jesus, and we say, you know what? I'm going to give this to you, God, because you've got a perspective on this that I can't have. Because you have promised certain things about your character, about who you are, that you will never violate. And so that's where faith comes in, where trust comes in, and we lean on God for our everything. This is the judgment that's been given to the Son. And because of that, the Son receives honor. I was in a courtroom one time, not because I had to be there, but because I had to be there for jury duty, okay? I was going in, I was on the juror list. I get all the way up toward the very end where I'm sitting in the box, and it was like 3 or 4 more people had to get voted off the island. I was terrified I was going to have to go down there. This jury box I was in was all the way down in Fairfield because I hadn't changed my address with my voter registration. Okay, it's a mess, all right? So I was getting invited to go be a jury in Fairfield, California, and I got toward the very end. Nobody wanted to be there. Nobody wanted to be serving on this jury. Let me tell you, everybody had jobs, they had kids, they had life, they had work. They didn't want to be there. There was one person in particular who definitely did not want to be there, okay? He had every excuse in the book. He stood up in front of the judge to plead his case, to not have to be a juror, saying the most ridiculous things about, I can't get to the bus on time. I don't have change for the bus. I'm going to have to walk from the bus to here. I might be late for this thing. I can't. I have a hardship. I can't. He had so many things he was shooting off, trying to get out of it. And the judge, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of terrified by a judge because they have the ability to determine what happens to you. You can be held in contempt if you're in there lying about something. He can be in trouble for perjury. It's crazy. And this guy kept doing this against the judge, and the judge wasn't really having it. He's like, I feel like you're messing with me. Just straight up said, I feel like you're messing with me. He finally ends up letting this guy go. But let me tell you, there was tension in the room. Everybody felt that you're messing with the dude that is Your Honor. You don't call him, hey, Mr. Judge guy. You don't call him, hey, Mr. Crawford. His name is Your Honor. That kind of honor, that kind of respect for the judge, that's the kind of honor and respect that Jesus deserves. His decisions, his choices, the things that he does, those deserve the kind of respect within a courtroom where judgments will be made and judgments will be given, where we say, you know what, Your Honor, you're right. And we submit to it. That's the kind of honor here. This honor of celebrating, of exalting above every other thing in creation. That's where Jesus belongs. And Jesus says this, look, whoever hears my word and believes in him who sent me will have eternal life. That's a promise, a straight promise from God. He says, look, if you would believe me, remember, I have the power to judge. I have the power to make right what's wrong. If you believe in me, you'll have eternal life forever. And you will not experience judgment. You won't experience the wrath to come. No, you're going to pass from death to life. Truly, truly, I say to you, an hour is coming and is now here when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God. Now, let me tell you guys, this is when the text shifts from talking about just a general condemnation against sin, or shifts from talking about the right that Jesus has to give life and death. It starts talking about one of the 3 things I hate. There's 3 things in this world I hate. 1, I detest, okay? Number 1, I hate heights. Number 2, I really don't like sticky things. And number 3, zombies. I don't get it. Why were zombies such a big deal? Okay, how did they become something where they feel like there had to be a movie for one every other year or every other month? They were coming out there for a season. You got The Walking Dead. Let me tell you, if you're into that stuff, God bless you. I can't watch it. It freaks me out, okay? I cannot watch it. Zombies give me nightmares. This is talking about a time in which the dead will rise, like zombie level, World War Z kind of rising. And when that happens, it's saying that, look, they're going to hear this voice. It's a terrifying picture. And they're going to hear the voice of the Son of God. This is a unique title for Jesus here. He's usually referred to as the Son of Man. There's a handful of times that John will write the Son of God. And when he does, it's to emphasize who he is and his status based upon John 20:31, where it says that these are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. That's a big statement. It's only in there a handful of times, and this is one of them. It's emphatically declaring that Jesus is the Savior, the Messiah. They're going to hear his voice. And those who hear, not just like, do you hear what I hear, Christmas music, whatever, but hear and follow suit and do what he says, they're going to live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself. And he has given him authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. He has the ability to determine what is ultimately true, ultimately good about all mankind because he is the Son of Man, the iconic archetypal human being from Daniel 7 that would come to save humanity from what we had done wrong. He says he's going to have the right to judge both the living and the dead, but all the people that are going to come back when Jesus comes back and all the people who are living right now, he's going to have that right. And he continues, Jesus says this, don't marvel at it. Don't be amazed at this thing, because an hour's coming when everybody in the tombs are going to hear the voice and come out. This is the zombie part, okay? This is the scary part. They're going to come out. And those who have done good are going to come to the resurrection of life. Those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. This is not works-based salvation. This is not do a good job in your life, pay your taxes on time, be good to your wife, and take care of your kids kind of salvation. That's not the good that's going on here. The good here is within the context of believing that Jesus is exactly who he says that he is. That's it. The only good in your life is you saying, I believe you are who you say you are. And that reinforms every other thing that you do. That reinforms the way you use your money, the way you treat your wife, the way you treat your kids, the way you treat everyone in your existence, the way that you interpret yourself, the actions you take when nobody else is looking. They are reinterpreted by one solid belief. And that is the Son of God is Jesus. No one else. We trust in him for salvation. We lean on him for everything. That is where life is found. The opposite from that is death. And not just like dying once, but we're talking an eternal death, forever separation from him. All of this about judgment, all of this about how Jesus works, about the relationship with the Father, every single thing that he does when it comes to judging evil, making right the wrongs in this world, it's all within the context of this idea that his judgments are just. Whatever Jesus decides to do, whatever call he makes, whatever way God brings this whole thing to a close at the end of time, whatever he does, it's just. It's right. It's right because it's exactly what the will of him who sent him wanted. It's exactly what the will of the Father had. And so we have to come to terms with that. It's uncomfortable. I know, it's uncomfortable to think about this end of time moment, but on many levels, as we've just examined God's judgment, I mean, you guys got a full Sunday stuff worth of things today, guys. All right, you got all the stuff about judgment we could probably talk about in a single Sunday. But here's the deal. In light of all of that, we know that Jesus' judgment, that God's judgment is just. And just here, as he's talking to these religious people who, for the record, were judging him. We're saying, you should die because you healed this man on the Sabbath and told him to carry a mat. Does that sound like judgmental religious people to you? It is, and it was. And he's saying this to those people, saying, hey, I am one with the Father. I submit everything to him. Everything you've seen me do, it's exactly what God wants. And every single thing I said, that's exactly what God would say. And beyond that, I have the ultimate judgment. Not you little Pharisees who think I've done something wrong. My Father's working, so I am working. That's what's happening in this text. And so we have this very simple, very easy way of ripping apart this text into one singular sentence. It's just this, that Jesus is God. He is. And just all these implications, that there's so much that goes along with it, that Jesus is God. But we know that Jesus is God. Because Jesus is God, we have to figure out what we do with the way that we judge other people, what we do with the way that we judge ourselves, what we do with the way that other people judge us, and almost more importantly, how we judge God himself, the pronouncement we've chosen to make on him. We have to ask ourselves, where are we on this chart? Are we sitting there saying, you know what, I'm part of that moral militia. I just need to enforce and reject all evil and make it happen, make it mine. Or I'm on team tolerate. Let's go, guys. Embrace and just love everything. Like, where do you find yourself? You part of the moral monks who just want to get out of there? You part of tolerance task force, just trying to make everybody be like kind of okay with each other? Where do you find yourself today? I know where I'd find myself today. I know where I'd place on the graph, where I find myself when I react and respond to a judgment that somebody has, a judgment that somebody makes, a way someone's treated me, a way I want to treat somebody else. I know where I'd lie. Where do you lie on this? Take a moment and just ask yourself that. Reflect on that. And now I want to ask you this. Could there be a fifth option? Could there be a fifth way that we're seeing in this text? I think there could. I think there is a fifth option. And I think that fifth option is screaming at us from this text. It's screaming at us saying this, that because Jesus is the Word, Jesus has the final word. Because Jesus is the Word, Jesus has the final word in everything. He is God, the Word made flesh. John 1, right? That he has been with God since the beginning. He is God. He is the example to us. He is God himself who dies for us on our behalf. And because he is the Word, he has the final word on all matters, on all things we encounter, on everything someone's done to us, on everything we've done to others. He has the final word on everything we think about him. His judgment is just. He has the final word because he is the Word. And so what do we do with that? What's our option? I think here's just a way of thinking of it, a way of applying this concept that he's the final word is this, that we are going to do this. We're going to do our best because we got to make judgments at some point, right? We have to decide where to send our kids to school, where we're going to go to work, what we're going to do with our time, with our money, our resources, our family, our parents, relationships. We have to decide what to do. We have to make judgments about who to surround ourselves with, who to not surround ourselves with. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use all the faculties God's given us. Our story, our intellect, our talents, our time that we've been given, the money, the resources that we have. We're going to use all of that to make the best kingdom decision that we can while maintaining a posture of submission to the one true judge. You know that posture of submission where you put up your hands, you say, okay, God, do with it what you will. Take from me what you have. Do what you've got to do, God. That posture of submission is the same one that Jesus takes in the dance. It's him saying, no, I'm going to do whatever the Father has said. I'm going to do whatever the Father has for me. I'm not going to speak a word unless it's a word he wants me to say. That kind of submission is the submission that we are invited into when it comes to judging others, when it comes to judging God, when it comes to judging ourselves. We are invited to do the best we can with what we've been given, to make the best kingdom decision we can. But at the end of the day, submit it to Jesus and say, God, you have everything. You have everyone. You take it. I trust you with who you are. Is that something that you feel like you could say today? Is it something that you feel like you could live today? I know for myself, this is a challenge. Lexi and I went through something the other weekend where we had gone in for an ultrasound, and we found on the ultrasound, the tech had found these cysts inside of our baby's brain. And let me tell you, in that moment, I freaked out. I did. I freaked out. I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, baby's not going to make it. It's not going to work out. God, what did you do? God, why are you doing this? Look, I'm a pastor. My job is to be, confident in Jesus or whatever, right? But in that moment, I remember sitting there thinking, like, God, what are you doing in this time? Have you been there lately? Have you been in a place lately where whatever you were encountering, whatever you were going through, you said, God, what are you doing? You almost cast a pronouncement and a judgment on God. You guys are the few days later, we get, the consultation with the doctor, and we find out that things are going to be okay. And it was just a normal variant. We didn't have to worry about it. The high-risk doctor looked at it, and we're going to be okay. And there was this weight lifted where I thought, oh my gosh, yes, it's going to be okay. God's got it. But I'm embarrassed to say that between Friday and Monday of that weekend, There were too many times where I came in and out of trust and terror, okay? I came in and out from God's got it to what do I do to make it work? I want you to know it's okay. It's okay if you don't trust God's judgment yet. It's okay if you don't trust God's plan yet. But what I want us to know and what I want us to be able to do and what I'm fighting for in my life, what I hope you're going to fight for in your life, is because Jesus is the Word, because He's God, because He's exactly who He said that He is, because we know He is perfect love, that His judgment is just because of those things. Because Jesus is the Word, would you let Him have the final word whatever you're going through this week, whatever you're going through in your life? Would you surrender that to Him and say, God, do with it what you will? It's in that heart, it's in that spirit that today we send you. We send you to go and be the living proof of a loving God to a world that needs to know that we have a good judge. We have a God who's on the throne that's making good calls. We have a God on the throne that we can trust with everything that we can have. We can trust Him with our unborn children. We can trust Him with our born children. We can trust Him with our not yet born children. We can trust Him with our marriage. We can trust Him with our parenting, with our finances. We can trust this good and perfect and holy and glorious and perfect God with everything that we have. You guys, as you go this week, as you click off of this, would you go knowing that we serve a God who sees you, who knows you, and who loves you? You guys have an awesome week in the Lord, and we'll see you next weekend.